sweet lips a little closer to the phone.
There's a kind of song that doesn't just make you sad, it finds you. The 1960s produced some of the most beautiful, devastating music America has ever known. And most of it came from people who had nothing left to lose. Some were rejected by radio, some were recorded in single takes because the singer couldn't hold it together long enough for a second one. But they survived, every single one of them. These are the 10 classic hurting country songs from the 1960s that will break you in half. Number 10. He'll Have to Go, Jim Reeves, 1960.
Pretend that we're together all alone.
Before we get to the songs that shattered the charts, there's one that almost didn't get made at all. It's late 1959. Jim Reeves is already a known name in Nashville. Smooth, velvet-voiced, the kind of singer who made women sit down and men go quiet. But the song his wife Mary found, written by Joe and Audrey Allison, wasn't the kind of thing RCA Victor was pushing in those days. It was slow, intimate, almost uncomfortably personal. RCA nearly passed on it. When it finally went to radio in late 1959, the response was cautious. Nashville wasn't sure what to do with a man who sang like he was whispering directly into the ear of the person he was losing.
Friend there with you, he'll have to go. Let's pretend he holding you the way I'd sway down low. Or is he
But something
holding
happened.
you?
By January 1960, it had climbed to number 1 on the Billboard Hot Country Singles chart. And then it stayed there. For 14 weeks. 14 weeks, sitting at the top of the country chart like it had nowhere else it needed to be. It crossed over. It hit number 2 on the Billboard Hot 100 pop chart. Jim Reeves, a country singer from Galloway, Texas, was suddenly on jukeboxes in places that had never played a steel guitar.
Yes or no?
The song sold
Darling,
over 1 million copies.
will understand.
It became one of RCA Victor's best-selling country records of the era, and it fundamentally expanded what people believed country music could do emotionally.
I'll tell the man. Do you want?
There's a phone call happening in that song. A man asking a woman in a crowded room to pretend they're alone together, to whisper something just for him. And when she can't, when the people around her make it impossible, he tells her gently, patiently, he'll have to go. Not angry, not desperate, just resigned, just devastated.
Put your sweet
Jim Reeves
lips
was killed in a
a
plane
little
crash outside
closer.
Nashville in July 1964. He was 40 years old. But that voice, smooth as river water over stone, never really went anywhere. Number 9. Crazy, Patsy Cline, 1961. Nobody wanted this song. That's the part people forget. When Willie Nelson wrote Crazy in 1961, he was a struggling songwriter scraping together a living in Nashville, pitching songs to anyone who'd listen. He played it for Patsy Cline. And Patsy, famously direct, famously hard to impress, loved it immediately. Her producer Owen Bradley was not so sure. Patsy had just been in a near-fatal car accident in June of 1961. She was still recovering from serious injuries when she went into the studio. Her ribs were cracked. She was on crutches. She could barely stand at a microphone. The first session didn't work. She couldn't hold the low notes, couldn't get the breathing right. The pain was too much. She went home, came back, And on the second try, Decca Records standing sideways at the microphone to manage the pressure on her ribs, when Crazy delivered finally released in October the most iconic vocal performance, it entered the country music history, peaking at number 2 on the Billboard Hot Country Singles chart. Close, but not the top. Here's what the chart position doesn't tell you. Crazy spent 21 weeks on the country charts. It crossed over to pop, reaching number 9 on the Billboard Hot 100. And in early 1962, it became one of the defining records of the CMA's early recognition era. More than 60 years later, it remains the most played jukebox song in American history.
For loving you.
Patsy Cline died in a plane crash on March 5, 1963. She was 30 years old. She never knew what she'd left behind. And that song, built on heartbreak, on cracked ribs, on a woman who refused to stop singing, outlasted every single person who doubted it. Number 8. I Fall to Pieces, Patsy Cline, 1961. 2 Patsy Cline songs on this list. It couldn't be any other way. I Fall to Pieces nearly didn't happen. Patsy hated it at first, hated the melody, thought the lyrics were too soft for her style. She'd been building a reputation on bold, brassy delivery, and she thought this song, written by Hank Cochran and Harlan Howard, made her sound weak. Owen Bradley convinced her to try it anyway. It was released in January 1961 and took nearly 4 months to reach the top of the country chart. A slow, grinding climb that had Nashville wondering if Patsy had missed her moment.
Like we've never kissed.
The music industry in 1961 was accelerating. Rock and roll was reshaping radio. Country labels were nervous. Then it hit number 1 in August 1961 and crossed over to pop, reaching number 12 on the Hot 100. But here's what made I Fall to Pieces different from anything Patsy had done before. It was among the first times a female country artist had been produced with that level of orchestration, lush strings, sophisticated arrangement, without sacrificing the raw emotional center of the performance. Bradley's production was ahead of its time by at least a decade. Patsy had wanted to sound strong. What she actually sounded like was honest. And honest turned out to be stronger than anything. There's a kind of sorrow in that song that feels specific and universal at the same time. The falling apart that happens when you see someone you loved, living a life that no longer includes you. When you have to keep your face together and your voice steady and your hands still. And you can't. You just can't. Patsy couldn't either. And that's exactly why it still hurts to listen to. Number 7. Detroit City, Bobby Bare, 1963.
I wanna go home.
This one came from a different kind of hurt. Not romantic, not the jilted lover or the jealous heart. This one came from the ache of a man who left home to find something better and found out too late that everything he needed was the thing he walked away from. Detroit City was written by Danny Dill and Mel Tillis in 1963, and when Bobby Bare recorded it, it landed in a category most Nashville labels didn't know how to market. It wasn't quite honky-tonk, wasn't quite pop crossover. It was something bleaker, a working man's lament about the industrial North, about the promise of factory wages and the loneliness that came with them. RCA released it with modest expectations. It reached number 6 on the Billboard Hot Country Singles chart and, remarkably, crossed to number 16 on the pop chart. But the numbers undersell what the song actually did. It was one of the first country songs to directly address the great internal migration. The millions of Southern workers who had left rural America for industrial cities, sending money home and dreaming about going back.
And after all these years, I find that
Bobby Bare won the Grammy Award for Best Country and Western Recording in 1963 for this song. But more than that, it gave a voice to an entire generation of people who'd made a trade they weren't sure was worth it. I want to go home. 4 words, that's all. And somehow those 4 words, delivered in Bobby Bare's flat, unadorned baritone, carried the weight of 10,000 one-way bus tickets and 10,000 broken promises and 10,000 nights staring at a factory ceiling. Some songs don't break your heart. They just remind you of what you've already broken yourself.
I wanna go home.
Number 6. It's Such a Pretty World Today. Wynn Stewart, 1967.
And every day's the same since I met you.
Here's a story Nashville almost let disappear. Wynn Stewart was one of the architects of the Bakersfield Sound, the raw, electric, unpolished California country that Buck Owens and Merle Haggard would later make famous. Stewart was doing it first, doing it louder, doing it with a sharp-edged honesty that Nashville's more polished producers considered rough around the edges. In the early 1960s, Stewart was a fixture in the clubs along the Vegas Strip and the Southern California circuit. He was recording, he was performing, he was writing songs that other artists would take and turn into hits, but his own career kept stalling.
Happiness is being close to you.
By 1967, when he released It's Such a Pretty World Today, he was in his early 40s and had spent the better part of a decade watching opportunities slide sideways. The song itself was a beautiful, deceptively simple declaration of love. But underneath it, if you knew Wynn's story, there was something almost desperate in its insistence on joy. It hit number 1 on the Billboard Hot Country Singles chart in May 1967, his first number 1. After more than a decade of trying. The cruel irony is that it arrived so late in a career that had already been lapped by the artists he'd influenced. By the time Stewart was finally topping charts, Merle Haggard, who had learned directly from Wynn Stewart, who had literally worked in Stewart's band, was already a superstar. Wynn Stewart died in 1985, relatively forgotten outside of serious country music circles. But that song, soaked in a joy that sounds earned because it absolutely was, proves that sometimes you have to survive a long time before the music catches up to what you already knew. If these songs are pulling at something in you, if they're dragging up names and places and years you'd put away, subscribe before we go further. There's a lifetime of stories like these still waiting, and we're just getting started on the ones that hit hardest. Because the next story is one Nashville didn't see coming from 1,000 miles away.
It's such a pretty world today.
Number 5. Apartment Number 9. Tammy Wynette, 1966. Before Stand By Your Man. Before the rhinestones and the stadium crowds and the magazine covers, there was Apartment Number 9. Tammy Wynette recorded this song in 1966 as her debut single for Epic Records. She was 24 years old. She had 3 young daughters. She'd driven herself from Alabama to Nashville in a car that barely ran, walked into CBS/Epic Records and talked her way into a meeting with producer Billy Sherrill. Most people in that meeting figured she'd be another pretty voice that didn't go anywhere. Apartment Number 9 was released in November 1966. It climbed to number 44 on the Billboard Hot Country Singles chart. Not a hit, not by Nashville's standards, but here's what that chart position doesn't capture. The song was a masterclass in emotional precision, a woman sitting alone in a near-empty apartment, watching the silence fill up the spaces that used to belong to someone else. Not crying, not begging, just sitting with it.
No, the sun will never shine.
Billy Sherrill heard something in that recording that most people missed. A singer who didn't perform grief, she inhabited it. Within 2 years, Tammy Wynette had the biggest female country album of the decade. Within 3 years, she had won the Country Music Association's Female Vocalist of the Year award. 3 consecutive times. The woman who recorded her debut in a borrowed session slot, who drove to Nashville on hope and fumes, became the first lady of country music. But if you want to hear who she really was, before the fame, before the machinery of stardom, go back to Apartment Number 9. Go back to that small, still, achingly lonely room. She was already completely herself.
In apartment number 9.
Number 4. Make the World Go Away. Eddie Arnold, 1965.
And make the world go away.
By 1965, Eddie Arnold had already been a country star for nearly 20 years. He'd had hits in the 1940s. He'd crossed over to pop. He'd sold millions of records, played Carnegie Hall, appeared on national television. The music industry had already written the second chapter of his career, the graceful decline of a legend who'd had his moment. Nashville had moved on. The industry was chasing youth, chasing the Bakersfield sound, chasing anything that felt new. And then Eddie Arnold recorded Make the World Go Away.
And make the world go away.
The song had been written by Hank Cochran in 1963 and had already been recorded by Ray Price, Timmy Euro, and Don Gibson. None of those versions had done much. The song itself seemed to be running out of chances. Eddie Arnold's version was released in September 1965. It went to number 1 on the Billboard Hot Country Singles chart and stayed there for 3 weeks. It then crossed to the pop chart and reached number 6 on the Hot 100. Meaning, a country legend with a career everyone assumed was winding down had just landed a major pop crossover hit.
And make
The album of the same name was certified gold. It was the biggest commercial success of his entire career. Think about that. 20+ years in the business, multiple reinventions, dozens of albums, and the song that would define him, the one that would outlast everything else, came when the industry had already decided he was finished. Make the world go away and get it off my shoulders. There's something in that plea that feels less like a love song and more like a survival song. Like a man who has simply carried too much for too long, asking for just one moment of relief. Eddie Arnold knew something about the long game that the music industry never learned. You don't get to decide when somebody's finished. Sometimes the best thing they ever do is still ahead of them.
and get it off my.
Number 3. He Stopped Loving Her Today. George Jones, 1980.
I watch the years pass slowly by.
Wait, I know. The calendar says 1980. But stay with me, because this song belongs on this list. It belongs in the same breath as every 1960s heartbreaker ever recorded. And the reason why is the story behind it. George Jones spent the 1960s establishing himself as perhaps the greatest pure country voice alive. He recorded White Lightning in 1959. He had hit after hit through the decade. But by the late 1960s and into the 1970s, his personal life, the drinking, the chaos, the legendary unreliability that earned him the nickname No Show Jones, had begun to erode everything. By the late 1970s, his career was in genuine freefall. Producer Billy Sherrill handed him a song written by Bobby Braddock and Curly Putman. George Jones reportedly hated it, said nobody would believe he'd ever stop loving anyone, that the song was too morbid, too strange, too slow. He recorded it, hated the result, wanted it shelved. It was released in April 1980. It entered the charts cautiously, then it hit #1 and stayed.
First time I'd seen him smiling you.
The phones at radio stations rang with people asking to hear it again, and again, and again. It won the Country Music Association Award for Single of the Year. It won Song of the Year. It was later voted the greatest country song of all time in a landmark CMA poll. He Stopped Loving Her Today is a song about a man who loved a woman his entire life and never stopped. Even when she left, even when the years passed, even when everything else fell away. He only stopped loving her today, the day they put him in the ground. This song would not exist without the 1960s, without the whole tradition of plain-spoken, devastating heartbreak country that the decade perfected. It is the culmination of everything that tradition built.
This time, he's over her for good.
And George Jones, the voice of a generation who'd nearly destroyed himself getting there, delivered it with every scar intact. Proof that some songs wait for the right broken soul to carry them home.
He stopped loving her today.
#2. Four Walls, Jim Reeves, 1957/early 1960s resurgence. Jim Reeves appears twice on this list. That tells you everything you need to know. Four Walls was released in 1957, but its emotional life, its second life, its real life, belongs to the early 1960s, when it became a fixture of late-night radio and a touchstone of what country heartbreak sounded like. The song is almost unbearably simple. A man alone. Four walls, the outside world carrying on without him, and somewhere out there, the woman he loved, carrying on without him too. What made Four Walls revolutionary for its time was the production. Where most country songs in the late 1950s were still leaning hard into honky-tonk tradition, loud, percussion-driven, raucous, Jim Reeves and producer Chet Atkins stripped everything back. Just voice, just whisper, just the unbearable stillness of a man sitting with his own loss. This was the beginning of what critics would later call the Nashville sound. The smooth, intimate, lushly produced style that would define country music for the next decade and beyond. Four Walls reached #1 on the Billboard Hot Country Singles chart in April 1957 and crossed to #11 on the Hot 100. But its real legacy was the template it set. Every quiet, intimate, emotionally devastating country record that followed, Patsy Cline, Tammy Wynette, Eddie Arnold, owes something to what Jim Reeves and Chet Atkins discovered in that studio.
Out where the bright lights
That sometimes the loudest thing you can do is go completely still. There's a reason this song kept playing on radios and jukeboxes long after its chart run was over. Long after Jim Reeves was gone. Because 4 walls, an empty room. A love that left and took all the sound out of everything. That never stops being true. Number 1. I'm So Lonesome I Could Cry. Hank Williams, 1949 / the song that defined a decade.
Well, he sounds too blue to...
There is only one place this list could end. Hank Williams wrote I'm So Lonesome I Could Cry in 1949. He was 26 years old. He wrote it in a single stretch of hours, the way the best things usually come, not crafted, not engineered, just arrived. As if the song had always existed and was waiting for someone with enough hurt in them to hear it. He recorded it as the B-side to a novelty song called My Bucket's Got a Hole in It. A B-side, tucked away, almost incidental. It barely charted. For years, this song was not considered one of Hank Williams's most important works. It lived in the shadow of Your Cheatin' Heart and Cold, Cold Heart and Hey Good Lookin', the songs that had actually performed on the charts. Then the 1960s happened. Cover after cover, reinterpretation after reinterpretation.
Never seen a night so long.
Artists who had grown up with Hank Williams, in America, in England, everywhere a radio signal could reach, started recording this song and discovering what it actually was. Elvis Presley recorded it. B.J. Thomas took a version to number 8 on the pop charts in 1966. By the late 1960s, it had been covered hundreds of times in dozens of languages. Rolling Stone magazine later named it one of the 500 greatest songs of all time.
Where you are, I'm so lonesome.
Bob Dylan called it the most perfect song ever written. But here's what matters most. Hank Williams died on January 1st, 1953. He was 29 years old, alone in the back seat of a car somewhere in West Virginia. His body finally unable to hold all the things he'd been putting into it for years. He never heard what this song became. He never knew. He wrote it in a single afternoon. A song about a whippoorwill calling in the dark, a robin weeping at the end of summer, a midnight train disappearing into the distance. And he put it on a record and sent it out into the world and never lived to see what it grew into.
That lonesome whippoorwill.